You don't wake up every day with a gun to your head. No one yells at you to get up, work, follow rules, be productive. But you do all of these things automatically. Why? Max Weber would have a clear answer. You have been trained to obey, not with force, but with social conditioning. Since childhood. Since you were little, you were told what was right, what was normal, what made you proud, and what made you ashamed. And little by little, without realizing it, you learned to fit in, not because you wanted to, but because it was the only way to be accepted. Weber saw this as the essence of modern domination. It does not impose by violence, it forms by routine. She doesn't force, she educates. She doesn't scream, she standardizes. When you follow the usual path, school, college, job, debts, weekends to live, no one questions you. On the contrary, they praise you. But Weber knew this obedience is dangerous. Because it looks like freedom. You think you're making choices, but you're just repeating learned commands. You didn't choose to study that. You chose what they said would give you a future. You didn't choose this lifestyle. You just followed the model everyone repeats. You don't think about whether it fulfills you. You think about whether it is acceptable. The result? A crowd of obedient, silent, functional adults, but profoundly disconnected from themselves. And Weber saw this clearly. The more rational the system, the more it needs predictable minds. And to have predictability, the system needs to train you, not to question, not to improvise, not to look for something beyond what is expected. You learned to be punctual, but not to be free. He learned to achieve goals, but not to listen to his own spirit. You learned how to please bosses, but never discovered what really lights you up inside. Modern domination doesn't demand forced obedience. It usually convinces you that obedience is the only way. Weber was not a barricade revolutionary. He was a thinker of the invisible. And he saw that behind the simplest everyday decisions, the major you chose, the job you accepted, even the clothes you wore, there was an invisible pattern that had been training you to function without thinking. You no longer need to be oppressed to be controlled. You just need to be conditioned. And when you learn to behave without knowing why, you are already obeying, and that's where the danger comes in. Those who get used to obeying in order to be accepted forget what it's like to be true. And you? How many decisions in your life were really yours? How many were just repetitions of something they said was right? Have you noticed that the modern world doesn't need you to think? It just needs you to function? This is what Max Weber was talking about. The rationalization of modern life requires efficient, predictable, well-behaved people, not necessarily conscious ones. You can have a degree, a salary, and even success, and still never have made a choice that is truly yours. And this is not by chance. It is part of a mechanism. The system needs productivity, not authenticity. It needs specialization, not reflection. Needs you higher, too busy to wonder if it makes sense. Weber said that modern society has become so structured, so functional, so focused on results, that it has begun to mold obedient minds en masse. And how do you shape an obedient mind? With routine, with goals, afraid of breaking the mold, with the belief that those who think too much waste time, with automatic rewards for those who conform, and silent punishments for those who question. You are being conditioned to repeat behaviors. Arrive on time. Follow the process. Don't create confusion. Don't speak loudly. Don't dream too much. And if something bothers you, swallow it. All this teaches you that being good is obeying without complaining, and being mature is not feeling too much. But Weber already knew this polite obedience has a cost. The cost is your tamed soul. You stop listening to the inner voice. You begin to doubt your impulses. And when you feel like changing, looking for something different, you sabotage yourself. It's not worth it. It's too late. That doesn't pay the bills. I will look immature. And so the system wins, not with violence, but with logic. Not by imposition, but by custom. You no longer feel the chains because now they are invisible, and they are inside. Weber saw this as one of the greatest pitfalls of modernity. The more rational society becomes, the more irrational becomes the life of those who live in it without conscience. Because the human spirit was not made to live only on metrics. He needs mystery. He needs doubt. He needs creation. He needs faith. And rationalization stifles all of that. You become excellent at following instructions, but terrible at listening to your essence. You become an expert at ignoring yourself. And the more you adapt to what is expected of you, the less you know what is expected of you. Weber knew. The system doesn't want to destroy you. It wants you to destroy yourself little by little, while you think you're making progress. And it all starts with a silent obedience that you never realized you learned, but learned very well. Max Weber did not believe that modern control arose from tyranny. For him, control arose from social education, especially in its subtler forms. And where does this training begin? In childhood. Since you were little, you were placed in an environment where rules, schedules, expectations, and standards of behavior were imposed as synonymous with good conduct. You learned that. Well-behaved boy does not interrupt. A polite child doesn't ask too many questions. A+ student is one who repeats well, not one who questions in depth. You weren't taught to think freely. You were taught to fit in. You weren't encouraged to be authentic. You were trained to be acceptable. And here comes the strength of what Weber called legitimate domination. When an authority seems natural, inevitable, and for your own good, it does not need to be questioned. Obedience becomes virtue. And thinking for yourself becomes synonymous with rebellion or deviation. You were taught to look for right answers, not deep questions. He was rewarded when he followed directions, and punished, even if subtly, when he dared to stray from the path. And the most dangerous thing, this programming comes packaged with love. Parents, teachers, leaders, they all mean well, but they don't realize that they are teaching you to silence your essence in exchange for approval. Weber observed that as modern society organized itself, it needed useful, predictable, efficient citizens, and this required starting training as early as possible. School became a testing ground for obedience. Sit up straight. Copy. Wait your turn. Memorize. Obey. You've spent years being molded to stay on track, not to think, but to repeat. And even as an adult, this training continues to work on you, behind the scenes of your mind. You hesitate to say what you really think. You feel guilty about resting. You doubt your own intuition. You ask permission to be who you are. And then you grow up thinking that maturity is synonymous with cold self-control, consistent performance, and an absence of emotion. But Weber would say, this is not maturity, it is domestication. It is the result of a profound process, which began long before you noticed. The scariest thing, you don't see this conditioning because it disguises itself as common sense. He tells you, don't do that, it's risky. You are being impulsive, be rational. Think about your future. But deep down, what he's saying is, stay where you are. Obey as always. Don't change the pattern. And you? Have you ever wondered how much of your decisions today are an unconscious repetition of a script taught to you way back when? Max Weber believed that the most dangerous force of modernity was not explicit power, but the routine that numbs consciousness. And this routine, silent, repetitive, predictable, conditions you to stop asking questions. You wake up, work, meet deadlines, turn in assignments, pay bills, sleep, and repeat. At first, you might have even been bothered by it, but over time, something inside you quieted down. Because no one around you seems to wonder if life could be different. And when everyone obeys, you feel wrong for doubting. Weber saw this phenomenon clearly. He said, modern domination need not oppress you. It only needs to occupy you, keep you tired, distracted, productive, filling yourself with obligations and responsibilities that seem urgent, but are rarely essential. You don't question the system, because you're too exhausted trying to survive within it. And so your mind adapts. She closes herself off to doubt. She runs away from introspection. She avoids any questions that begin with what if or why. What if I was in the wrong place? What if this wasn't the way? What if I didn't want any of this anymore? Questions like that bother me. And the modern system, which Weber analyzed coldly, has no room for those who are bothersome. You are trained to ignore these concerns, because stopping to think delays production, because hesitating seems like weakness, because wanting something different sounds like ingratitude, so you continue. Complete tasks, climb steps, earn applause. But inside, the question you don't allow yourself to ask echoes silently. Does this make sense to me? Weber would say, modern obedience is sustained by routines that normalize meaninglessness. You learn that feeling is secondary. Thinking for yourself is dangerous, and being efficient, that's all that matters. But the price of this efficiency is high. You forget what it's like to dream. Forget what it's like to wish without calculating. Forget what it's like to exist outside of the role. Routine has taught you not to think, just to repeat, not to seek, only to fulfill, not to create, only to maintain. But the soul was not made to repeat. It was made to expand. And Weber knew, modern domination wins when you stop asking questions. Because every sincere question carries the seed of freedom. And you? When was the last time you asked a question that made you afraid of the answer? Max Weber didn't just talk about systems, rules, and structures. He went deep where few have wanted to look, into the way modern humans have been trained to obey out of fear of displeasing. Have you ever felt guilty about saying no? Have you ever canceled yourself to maintain harmony? Have you ever preferred to keep your opinion quiet so as not to bother someone? If so, Weber would understand. Because in modern times, control doesn't come with shouting, it comes with subtle expectations. You obey not because someone tells you to, but because you fear the social discomfort of being different. Weber would say that the most efficient power is not the one that forces you, but the one that makes you watch yourself. You begin to shape your tone of voice, your behavior, your career choice, even your hobbies, to avoid the sideways glance, the veiled criticism, the rejection, and little by little, you no longer know where what you feel ends and where what is expected of you begins. The modern system is sophisticated. He doesn't threaten you. He rewards you for being acceptable. You get promoted when you fit in. You are praised when you don't question. You are loved when you don't bother. And all of this reinforces a silent message. Don't be you. Be what works. Weber saw this as a kind of emotional domination, disguised as civility. There is no violence. There is adjustment. There is no explicit censorship. There is constant self-censorship. You start apologizing for being intense, apologizing for wanting more, to diminish oneself so as not to appear arrogant, to keep quiet so as not to create tension, and the fear of displeasing becomes a cage. You become your own jailer, and the system benefits the most. Because a person who fears rejection is easily manipulated. She does what she's told, even when she knows it's not right. She follows the safe path, even though she knows it's not hers. She lives for acceptance and dies silently inside. Weber would say, this kind of domination is dangerous because you start calling education what is, in fact, self-nullification. You were not made to please everyone. You were made to honor your own conscience, but fear trained you. He taught you that to be loved is to be obedient, that to be accepted is to be harmless, that being respected means never bothering, and so you obey, not out of conviction, but out of fear. And fear, when normalized, becomes a lifestyle. Weber knew, whoever is afraid of displeasing has already lost their freedom. Max Weber knew, modern domination does not shout. She smiles. It doesn't imprison us in cells. It imprisons us in contracts, in goals, in rules that seem logical, but suffocate the soul. She doesn't impose herself with fury. She introduces herself with good manners, code of conduct, and performance reviews. That's why it works so well. You don't obey because you are weak. You obey because you have been indoctrinated with praise. Because every time you erase yourself in the name of harmony, the world rewards you, and every time you dare to think differently, you feel the weight of silence, of exclusion, of, "It wasn't very professional of you." Weber identified this phenomenon as a new type of domination, rational legal domination. It does not depend on explicit fear. It is sustained by the logic of the process. Everything that is impersonal, objective, neutral, but behind this neutrality is the emptying of the spirit. You can follow all the rules and still lose your truth. It can be functional and dead inside. Because modern obedience is discreet, elegant, and deeply deadly. She kills your ability to say enough, your courage to be different, your willingness to feel deeply, your intuition. And what's left? A present body, a trained mind, but a silent soul. You start behaving like a machine, and you think that's maturity. You cut ties with your own desire, and think that's balance. You say, "I'm fine," and inside you're imploding. Weber saw no easy way out, but he saw clarity as a starting point. He knew that danger lies precisely where there appears to be order, because the order that does not allow questioning is just a very polished prison. You can keep fitting in, you can keep obeying. But at some point, the pain of not being whole will scream louder than the comfort of being accepted. And that will be the moment when you will realize the obedience that the world applauds may be the very thing that is silently killing you. Weber already knew. The system doesn't need to force you. It just needs you to keep smiling as you fade away. And when that smile becomes unbearable, maybe it's time to stop obeying. Max Weber did not write revolutionary manifestos. He did not propose chaos. What he offered was something much more radical, lucidity, because before you can free yourself, you need to see. And before you resist, you need to wake up. The obedience that Weber studied is so effective because it convinces you that it is normal. It hides in the words you repeat without thinking. It has to be this way. Life is really hard. Who am I to change that? But these sentences are not yours. They are the voices of the system speaking through your mouth. They are the result of years of conditioning. You were trained to obey in order to be accepted, and you didn't even realize the price of it. But now that you understand what to do, Weber wouldn't tell you to scream. He wouldn't tell you to destroy the system. He would say, disobey with conscience. Disobey the autopilot. Disobey the silence you were taught to maintain. Disobey the routine that doesn't listen to you. Disobey the logic that suffocates the spirit. Because every time you say yes to something that erases you, you reinforce the prison. But every time you say no courageously, even silently, you crack the walls of the cage. You can disobey, choosing what moves you, not what promotes you. Moving away from environments where you are only worth what you deliver. Listening to your intuition, even when it contradicts what you expect. Saying, "This doesn't make sense to me anymore," and not apologizing for it. Disobeying is not being rebellious. It's being real. It's stopping dancing to the rhythm you were taught when your soul asks for another song. Weber knew the system survives on its unconscious adherence. But if you start to see it and question it, it loses strength within you. And that is more powerful than any external revolt. Because when a human being awakens, automatic obedience dies. True freedom is not in breaking the bars. It's realizing that you should never have called this home. So the final question Weber would leave us with would be this: will you continue to be what they expect, or will you remember who you really are?